Okay, cool. So I think we can get started. So thanks everyone for joining. I'm excited to be doing a different thing for once. Contemplating writing a blog post. I thought about doing a recorded video, but then I thought what a better way than to just get some live questions and have people ask me things as I go. So the context of this live stream is that I've been working a lot with constraint layout, and I've taught a lot of workshops and helped a lot of people with constraint layout, and I've seen a lot of misuse with using it. So a lot of people do some things that, they work and the layout works for the most part, but some kind of sort of best practices maybe, or some things that maybe are not optimized for how you would use constraint layout, or maybe some errors as well. So today, what we're going to be doing is building a layout that looks very similar to the Google Play Movies app. And if you want to follow along, you can try. I don't know how well you'll be able to keep up, but you're welcome to try. So you would need Android Studio 3 installed, and you can find the resources for the layout that we're going to be building at that link. So bit.ly droid layout, and just the accent color that we'll be using as well, you can find there. And then the full example, the whole repo can be found on my GitHub. So it's just Rigaroo on GitHub if you want to go check out the whole example. So just a little bit more context of what exactly we'll be building. So if you have a look, if you've ever used the Google Play Store app, and you've gone and browsed and seen what a movie would look like on Google Play Movies, it's got a nice looking layout. So there's a poster image, a big 16:9 image, some buttons, and some more buttons at the bottom. Oh, now it's clicking some other stuff. So it's quite a nice looking layout. There's also some sort of scrolling action here as well, which we won't be getting to do with constraint layout, but it is indeed possible. So yeah, we're going to be trying to build this layout from scratch. And as I go, we'll be looking at the different features of constraint layout and why maybe you should start using it, and some misconceptions about it. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll learn how to get comfortable with constraint layout. And I figure the best way for that to happen is if you just start actually using it or watch someone use it, which is also why I've decided to do a live stream of it. So you can ask your questions as we go. And then you might get a bit of better understanding of some different features in constraint layout. So if you want to participate and follow along, you're welcome to open up your own Android Studio, and you can head to this link and then download the resources that we'll be using, just so you can sort of get a complete picture of what it'll look like. And yeah, so we can start building it. Let me just see if I've got everything covered there. Yes. Okay, it's cool. So what I'm going to be doing is going from scratch. So the first thing I'm going to be doing, so this is the constraint layout one checked out from GitHub. So we won't be using this one because obviously everything's done here, and that's not the point of the stream. So I'll just be going straight and creating a new project. So file, new project, and we can say constraint layout demo live. And let me move this into better, so many folders. Okay, now where do I have it? No. GitHub. Okay, new folder. Okay, constraint layout live. It went in a different place. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I'm not going to be using Kotlin today. Sorry for all of those that want to, but we'll just be using Java for the time being. Okay, and we'll support from KitKat, and we'll just go ahead and create an empty activity. We can just leave it as main activity. And now we wait for Gradle to build. Hopefully nothing goes wrong here. Okay. So some questions so far. Do we need constraint layout 1.1.0 -beta 3? So I will be using that in this example, the beta version, but there is also the stable version that comes packaged with the latest Android Studio. So if you have a look at, for example, the build.gradle file that is already generated when we create a new project, you'll see that by default it starts to use ConstraintLayout 1.0.2. So the difference with this one and 1.1.0 beta 3 is that there's a few more features in the beta version. So there is a stable version that you can use, but the beta version we'll be using today because it provides a few more features. So we can head to this one and say beta 3 and sync again. Cool. So now we've got Constraint Layout Beta 3. So yeah, just the main differences between beta at the moment and the standard one that comes packaged is that there's a few extra features. So for instance, I think guidelines or groups aren't available in the previous version, and now they're available in the beta version. So it's up to you what you want to use for your app. Okay, so if we head to our layout folder, so we can just find the activity main folder. So by default, I don't know why it's heading to the text file, but I'm going to go to the design view. So a lot of people, and if you've been an Android developer for a while, you've probably got more comfortable using the text editor than using the design layout editor, which is, I think I was also in that phase a while ago. So I never liked to do things because the editor just never really worked for me. But with the new editor, it's really a lot easier to use, and you can actually do things and they look how they will look on a device. So hopefully by the end of this, you're a little bit more comfortable and you want to actually use the layout editor instead of going to default to the text editor. I'd say most of my time I spend about 90% in the layout editor now and 10% or so in the text editor, just to edit one or two things that might not be sort of easy to do on the layout editor. So by default, when you go to the design view, there's quite a few different buttons and can be quite overwhelming. So the first thing I like to do is just enable design and blueprint mode. So this gives you sort of, the blueprint mode shows you more details around what exactly your layout looks like. So in this example, we've just got the hello world text, which I'm just going to delete because I don't need that. And now when we start to drag things on and off, we'll see the different constraints in that automatically get added. So okay, so the first thing we want to do, so if we look at the layout that we have here, so we have this Despicable Me layout. There is also another layout if we look in that folder that I've shared, if you're still looking for it, the constraint layout folder. So we're going to be basing it basically off this, not that one, but very similar. So we've got a little screenshot from the app of what exactly we want to build. It'll look quite similar, but not exactly the same. Obviously, taking into account there's quite a lot of elements on this page, so we'll build as close as we can and get as close as we can to the solution. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is obviously try build this 16:9 image and then do the poster image. So the nice part with, no, don't play a stream. Go back. Okay, so the nice part with constraint layout is that the making dimensions on an image view is quite easy. So if I have to just drag on an image view, I can drag one on. Okay, I haven't added that poster image to my project yet, so I'll just go ahead and set one of the default ones. It's fine. We can change this later. So unfortunately, you can't drag one on without setting an image view. It just deletes it. So we'll set one for now. But we actually want to drag in that poster image just so that we can get the look of that other, we can get the look of the exact layout that we want to build. So let me just find it quickly. Oh my goodness, I'm the worst at navigating this. Ah, yes, I downloaded it. Okay, yes. So this is the screenshot I was looking for. No, not Captain Underpants. Okay, so we're going to be building the Beauty and the Beast looking one. Obviously, it's the same layout that you would use for if you wanted to use Captain Underpants or something. But yeah, so we'll be building the Beauty and the Beast one. So I've got my header image in that folder, and the poster image as well. So for those that's joined in a little bit later and you want to follow along and try build this, you can head to this link. Hopefully it's working. Somebody says it doesn't work. Let me just double check. Yeah, it should be working. So that link, get it again. So bit.ly/droid-layout, and you'll be able to download all the resources that we're going to be using. Okay, so let's drag the header image into our drawable folder. Okay. Okay, so we've got our header image. I'm also going to do the poster image while I'm here. Okay, so a lot of people have asked me this when I've sort of done this demonstration before, and they talk about the fact that you might need to, with normal Android image post or like displaying a bitmap, they ask the question of, do I need to make sure that do I still need to do the resizing of image views or this resizing of bitmaps to display in an image view? Because if you've done Android before, you probably know that just setting a bitmap on an image view can use up too much memory, or you've got like a really large bitmap. So yes, you still have to do that when you're using ConstraintLayout. It doesn't automatically manage the sizes. So I'm just putting these in here for now, but you should be a better person than me and make sure that you've got either all the different resources for different size devices, or that you're getting them from the server and the server resizes them before you display them. So for now, we're just going to put them in here just for our example. But if you are building a layout in production, you probably want to make sure that they are properly resized for the correct size to screen. Okay, so this first header image that we've got, we're going to give it a name of image view header, and we're going to set the source of it to be the new layout. I've also found that this needs to bold before it finds the layout, the resource again, which can be a little bit annoying. Okay, let's try get this one. Pick a resource not available. Okay, all right. Now I've gone and done something. Okay. So I can change this back. I don't know why. I rotated somehow. Switch to portrait. Okay. Cool. No, not available. We'll switch back to text view. Don't do this. Okay, so we'll set that to the header. Go back to our design view. Okay, cool. So now we've got this header image placed on our screen. So one thing to note that I think a lot of people don't do when they're busy working with constraint layout is that they don't follow the warnings that are here visible in this component tree. So they just kind of ignore them and hope that the thing will work. So my advice is to keep looking at these sort of warnings and watch what they say. So for example, this one's saying margin left with margin start for better support for right to left layout. So I should probably do that as well, but I'm still busy trying to position this element. So yeah, so let's position this element first, and then we can see what we have with this, the errors that we have. So you can see when I dragged something onto our view, it automatically started to add these constraints. So or what we call chains. No constraints, sorry, chains is something else. So it created, so because I have this sort of auto connect feature on, that by automatically, when you drag something onto this view, it'll automatically start to create these constraints for you. So you can see these constraints here. So I can delete these if I want, and I can create them myself if I want to. But if you start to drag something again, it'll start to create your constraints again. So if that gets a little bit hairy for you, you can just turn off this auto connect feature off if you want. So, okay, so I've got it connected to the left, the right, and the top, and it's got a big margin on the top. So I don't really want that margin, so I'll just set that to 0. But now you can see like the actual image view is not really taking up the size of the poster itself. So this should be like a 16:9 ratio image. So how you use dimensional constraints is basically you click on your item, and instead of saying the wrap content, you would say match constraint for both the width and the height. Okay, so now we can see it doesn't know what size of the image should be. So if you click on this little triangle in the corner, you'll see you get this sort of, I don't know why it's a triangle, but if you click on it, you'll start to see this ratio item appear. So now it's applied the ratio of 1:1, but we don't want this. We want to use a 16:9 ratio. And now that's as simple as it gets. So you would just now have an image view that's a 16:9 size image view, which is quite difficult to achieve if you're trying to do this without using constraint layouts. So we've got our image view set, we've got a header, we've got some match constraints, we've got a ratio set on it. So we've still got an issue here. So now it says it's missing a content description attribute on the image. So you should provide these. So this is basically for accessibility, where users that use your app can't see, or they're using a talkback service, so it speaks out what's visible on the screen for them. So we can change this to say something for now. What are we going to call it? Content description. So we can just say for now, header image, and we can go header image string. So I don't know if I would actually, so this header image doesn't really provide contextual value to a user. So if I had to click on it, it's not really going to provide me much information. So for somebody that's using TalkBack, I don't know if this image would be much value to them. So we could also just, for this image, say at null, and it won't speak out anything when that image is touched, because it doesn't actually mean anything for the user. So we don't need to, it's just for decorative purposes. Okay, so we've got the header image view set, we've got our constraints set on it. So now we can start to look at adding that sort of poster image that we had if we look at this screenshot. So we'll be adding this poster image on here. So we can do the same thing. So we'll just take an image view and drag it on. So now we've got our poster. We can select that, click OK. And this one is quite a big poster at the moment. So for now, I'm going to just set the height of it to about 150 dp. No, 150 dp. Okay, so that's a little bit more manageable to work with in the layout editor. So what we can do now is we want this image view to be constrained to the sides. So we can just click on it and drag a constraint to it. But we also want it to be constrained to the middle. So we want the middle of this poster to be constrained to the bottom of this one. So with ConstraintLayout, there's quite a cool feature called a center constraint. So what you do with this is you take the bottom of your image, of your view, and we align it to the bottom of that image view. Now we take the top constraint and we align it also to the bottom of this image view. And you'll see what this does now is it creates what we call a center constraint. So it's centering this whole view to the bottom of this view, which is also quite a difficult thing to achieve if you're using something besides constraint layout. So you would have to do some kind of maybe negative margins, which are not really a good idea if you're doing those. But it's also, yeah, it's not such a good idea to do negative margins, but you could also do it with like some kind of calculations if you wanted to. But using constraint layout makes it quite easy to do. Okay, so we've got our center constraint set on it. We've got a constraint to the side. What you'll also notice that I've seen a lot of people sort of leave out or not really be aware of is this automatic margins that are being added onto my constraints. So this is configurable here. If you click on this little 8 button here, you can change the default margin that's being added onto every single view. So if you don't like it being the default of 8, you can just set it as 0 dp if you want. But yeah, so that's one common misconception that I see a lot of people not really paying attention to. So we've got these different margins set, but now we also want to set this thing to be of a certain ratio, because at the moment it's taking up a lot of the screen, and we want to actually make sure that it always is a poster size image view that we have. So we're going to do the same thing by creating a ratio that we'll use here. So instead of the width being wrap content, we want to change this one to be match constraint. And that's what allows us to make sure that we can apply this ratio. So as soon as you have a match constraint, it'll allow you to toggle this and you'll get that little triangle in the corner that you can use. And that's what, so a lot of people have like, I can't get access to this ratio thing. How did you do it? It's always once you've only got match constraints. So if you're trying to use match parent or anything like that, it won't work. So you have to have that set as match constraints. Okay, so for the poster, I think it's a ratio of 3:2. No, 3:2. No, 2:3, I think. Always get this one wrong. Yeah, okay, so it's about a 2:3 ratio. There are a little bit different sizes with posters. So yeah, we'll just leave that as 2:3 for now. Okay, so we want to maybe add a little bit bigger of a margin on this one. If we have a look at our example layout, it's a little bit more padded on this side. So we can just change this here. So let's give it a 16 margin. Oh, that's starting to look a little bit better. Okay, so we've got that one. All right, we've still got some warnings over here. So let's have a look at what it says. We've also got it as a really bad name. So let's give it a better name. Image view poster. Okay, and it is probably moaning about content description as well. So we will leave this one. We'll also set it to null. Don't copy what I'm doing here, but I'm just trying to get rid of the warnings. But if you're going to production, please make sure it has a proper content description. Okay, so we've got those two set out. Now we want to add text view. So let's have a quick squiz at our layout. Okay, so we're going to add this Beauty and the Beast text view, and we can do that by just going to text view, and drag this one on. Okay, so you can see AutoConnect didn't know how to create the constraints for this one, so it didn't create any. So one other big misconception that a lot of people don't realize is that even though your layout is placed here like this, when you run it on your device, it's not going to look like that. It's just going to, because it's not constrained, it's going to go straight to the top and not be constrained to anything. So if you have a look at the text of this, so the text behind what this layout is, you'll see Android Studio has added these two tags onto this view. So the first one is layout editor absolute X and layout editor absolute Y. So these are just used for the layout editor itself. And if you're using them, it means that if you see them visible in your XML, it means that this text view hasn't been properly constrained, because as soon as your text view is properly constrained, these X and Y positional values are removed from your text view. So this is purely for the design editor, and it won't be used when you go and deploy this layout onto a device. Okay, so let's see what happens when we start to constrain it. So we want to constrain this to the bottom of this image view and to the side of this image view. Okay, there is some, I think, weird bug where it like pulls it to the side. I don't know if you saw that, and then gets it correct. But anyway, so now it's constrained to the side and the top of this image view. So we can have a look now, and we'll see that those positional X and Y values are gone from this XML. So if you're seeing those, just make sure that you've got constraints on everything set. Otherwise, it'll probably not work when you run it on a device. Okay, so let's add or make this image view or text view have a little bit more padding, because it's really squashed on this thing. Okay, so we've got that. Let's give it a bit of a better name. So text view, movie heading. Okay, so one thing that a lot of people also don't know is the namespace of tools. So what this is it allows you to set something just visible for the design editor, but not for anything else. So it'll make sure that it only displays to you when you're designing, but not when it's deployed on the device. So you can say here, Beauty and the Beast. Cool. But when you run it, it's going to say text view on the device. So we'll just copy that there for now. This should also be extracted to strings.xml file, but we won't be doing that just for sake of making this video not so boring. Okay, so one also thing that I see a lot of people that don't do this or know about is the text appearance options. So with these options that you see here, they give you material design look and feel without you having to do any of the setting of the text size or the text color. So in this example, if I use, I think it's display 1. No, that's really big. I think it's headline. Really big as well. Display 4. Whoa. So big. Okay. So we'll use display 1 or caption. Which one? Body 2? No. Okay, so interesting thing to note, just so you can also follow this. So on the material design guidelines, you'll see, oh, there's an error there. Yeah, no, not the colors. Guidelines. Okay, so these guidelines for the typography will relate exactly to the values that you get in Android Studio. So for example, if you want to use the title size text, you can go and find app compat title. No. Headline, inverse. Yeah. So that'll then take all the, so if your designers are using this and saying, okay, just I use this one, you'll be able to use this directly from app compat without having to manually go and make those yourself. Okay, so we've got our text view. It's got a constraint to the top and bottom. But I noticed what a lot of people do, and this is another misconception or misuse, should I say, of constraint layout, is that they don't constrain it properly to something else. So for instance, they just leave it like this with a top and a side constraint. But then when this text view gets populated on in production, and this text is a really long text, it'll go off the screen because I haven't constrained it to the side of anything else. So this is another problem. So if you have a look now, if I start typing something else, you'll see that because it's not constrained to that side, it just goes off the side of the screen. So what you need to do is just make sure that you've got a constraint on all sides of the screen. So we can add one here now by just clicking this plus button. Yeah, come on. Okay, cool. So now we've got a constraint on this side. Yeah, I would also just add some more padding on that side as well. Wait, hold on. Okay, so we're going to add a button as well. So I just want to delete the end of this text so that we don't have overlay for now. So another issue that we need to just cater for is when you've got constraints and you use something like wrap content. So this is also where an issue can come in. So you can see now, because I've got wrap content set in this and all constraints, it doesn't really know how to properly constrain this view. So I can change this now to match constraints, and then it will automatically like resize it and actually keep it within the bounds that you've constrained it to. So what I would say, one thing is to avoid using match parent completely, because that doesn't really make sense now with constraint layout. So anywhere where you're going to use match parent, you should be using match constraint. And then wrap content, just be aware of like its limitations. So in that example, it would be too big for the view, so it wouldn't make sense to use that. So, okay, so we'll keep it at match constraint for now. And now what we can do is we can start to drag in and make that little other image button that we had. So if we go look back and look at the view, so we're going to start adding this image button. So we can drag this image button on. Okay, and now that was the bookmark button. Let's just add something. These are really nice throwbacks of old look Android. Yay. Okay, we'll drag in then the proper resource for that. So let's take from that download, we've got this bookmark. Okay. Okay, so that's the little bookmark icon that we've got. So if we head back to the main activity and set the source of it. Oh, it didn't generate it. Damn, doesn't do that often. Okay, we'll do it here. And what's it called? IC bookmark. Okay, so I think Android Studio needs to rebuild in order to get that properly for some reason. Oh, errors. Oh, color accent. Never seen this one before. Values, colors, color accent. Okay, I do want to still change this to that other value that we had. And then we'll fix that error. Okay, we got the cool red now. So we have what is going on here, color accent. Click generated icon. Okay, let's try rebuild. If all else fails, rebuild. No? Okay, I'm just going to change this to no. If it, okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, so the reason why it's an XML file is that's how Android does the vector drawables. So I'll show you how to import an SVG into Android Studio to make it get into this XML stage. I just didn't do it for this one. Okay, so it appears that color accent was causing the issue. I don't know why, it's worked before. But yeah, demo gods, right? Okay, so what you can do instead of doing that is you can use what we call a drawable tint, I think, or a tint on this whole thing. So we can say color accent, and then that'll tint it to the correct color that we want. Okay, but we don't want the background on this button because that looks a little bit horrible. So we can set the background on this thing to, so we can do the same thing where we set it to null. The problem with this, so it'll look like it doesn't have a background, which is nice, but if you try click on it, you won't get that sort of ripple effect that what normally happens on buttons. So you would probably want to use, there's some other options that you can use. I've got it on that sample project that I've done. So on this one itself, I've set it to selectable item background. So we can copy this just to get that sort of ripple effect on the button. So that people don't moan at me for using at null. Okay, so we've got the button, but it's not constrained properly. So it doesn't have a proper top level constraint. So we can go and add that. And it's got a side constraint. We want to make a margin that's a bit bigger on the side. Okay, cool. So we've got this little image button. And now what we want to do is constrain this Beauty and the Beast text to this image button so that it doesn't go over that text. So we can remove this constraint. And oh, this is going to be difficult to add now with the short text. Okay, this is probably when I would go into the layout editor and edit the text or the constraints. Okay, that makes it a little bit easier for us. Cool. So now we've got the constraints set to of this text view to the side of this button and the top of that, and it has still got a little moaning. Okay, hard-coded string. So that's quite an easy one to fix, but we'll leave it for now. So we want to say Beauty and the Beast and Beauty and the Beast. Okay, so up to now we have seen, why has it got a set height? We don't want it to set the height. No, wrap content. Yes, that's better. Okay, so now up to now we've seen that I've been setting the margins on this thing programmatically to 16 dp. So what's probably a better way to do this is to use what we call a guideline in ConstraintLayout. So a guideline basically is like if you use something like Photoshop or anything else, you've been used to sort of having these sort of red lines and aligning things to it on this view. So we can do the same thing where we don't have to set 16 dp on every single thing. We can just do it and set it on, set one guideline and then set everything to match to this guideline. So to get that, you would just right click on this and say helpers, add vertical guideline. And you'll see it doesn't really appear here, and it's a little bit hard to find, but it's already been added to your component tree. So if we click on this guideline here, we'll see it in our blueprint mode. So by default, it sets the like margin of it or the guideline value to 20 dp, but you can sort of drag it to 16 dp, or you can set it to a percentage of the screen, 4%. So that's quite a little useful thing. So now what we can do, once we've got this guideline on the screen, we can align things to this guideline instead of to the side of the screen. So I can delete this guideline, or this constraint, sorry, and constrain it to the guideline instead. And then I can remove this margin on it completely. And I can do the same for the other side of the screen as well. So right click, helper, add guideline, vertical guideline. And that one's there. Now it's hard to a little bit move. Okay, so we wanted to go from the other side of the screen. So what this means is that it's going 324 dps from that side of the screen, which is not going to really scale up properly to other size devices. So we want to just click on this little icon at the top, and now it goes from the other side of the screen. So we can go and now set this to 16 dp on that side. And now I take this button and take this guideline, or this constraint. Oops, this is a little bit of a tricky one. No, it doesn't seem to like that. Oh, I think it already did. Okay, so we can check this in the layout, in the text. So what were we looking at? The button. So the image button constraint to the startup. Okay, so it's got the guideline set there. So interesting to note, the guidelines are just little objects here as well that are invisible when you run the thing, but they do help you align things to it. Okay, so the next thing that we can do is add another text view. So we can drag this one underneath the Beauty and the Beast. And this one we're going to align to the bottom of that and also to the side of this text. And we also want to add a margin of 16 dp on this one. And we can just say on this one we want to have, I think it was like the number of minutes or something, so 100, or it was like the PG rating, so PG 13. Comedy, I don't think it's a comedy, but, and 113 or 12 minutes. Okay, so that just gives us some information around what exactly this movie has. Let's have a double check on this layout. Okay, I think it's using the right size one. I'm playing this by eye, but you should probably have proper designs from your designer to tell you exactly what size they should be. Okay, so now for this one, we also want to make sure that it's constrained to the side of this view. So we also want to add that constraint there. So another sort of misconception that people have is that they don't use, so there's a sort of, I want to have a quick showcase of an example where people are using match constraint versus bias. So let's just call this quickly. I just want to make a quick example. Okay, so a lot of people, I've seen this problem come up quite a lot, is they have a text view and they constrain it to the sides, and then instead of making it match constraint, they use this thing called a bias. So the bias allows you to sort of move it and bias your view to a certain direction. So now it is sort of aligned to the left and works sort of as intended. The problem with this comes in is when you start to do sort of like right to left layouts where your text needs to be on this side. So then you would need to like programmatically control the bias in terms of if it was a right to left, so if people had all their text on the other side of the screen. So instead of doing this bias thing that you have here, the better way to do it is to have drag on a text view, and we can create the constraints like we had before, but instead of just leaving it as the width of wrap content, we say match constraints, and that'll automatically make sure it uses the correct right to left layout, as well as bias, or not bias it, but make sure that it starts at that side. So this is one of the big issues that I've seen a lot of people do, and I don't think it's such a good idea to be using the bias for this. So I would prefer to just use the match constraint for that one. Okay, so let's go back to our main activity. So we've got this view that's got this sort of problem as well. So we can set, instead of wrap content, we can set the width of match constraints. So just to note for those that don't know, match constraint, if you look at it programmatically, it sets it to 0 dp, which is sort of like trigger for match constraint. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the next thing that we want to create. So the next thing I think is a little divider. Oh no, the buttons. Okay, so what I would do now is, because the size of this text view could be smaller, so say for instance it just said beauty instead of Beauty and the Beast, I would go, and then this would sort of move a little bit further up. I would go and make what we call a barrier. So a barrier sort of groups a whole bunch of elements together and makes sure that the one that's the biggest height or the biggest width is used as that sort of last point on the screen. So I can just give you a quick demonstration of what that means. But basically to do it, you would just right click and say helpers, add horizontal barrier. And again, you can't see it on the view, but it's added into your component tree. So this barrier now is at the top and it's a little bit hard to see. So in order to add something to make up a barrier, you would just click on the things that you want. So we want the poster as well as the text view. I should be naming these things properly, but it's fine. Okay, so now we want this to form our barrier. So we would drag these two into our barrier, and you'll note that it just contains references to these items on our view. So we have now this poster as well as the text view forming this barrier. But we also want this barrier to be to the bottom of these things. So you can see at the moment, if I click on it now, it's sort of a faint line here which shows where the barrier is. But we want it to be at the bottom of these views. So we just click here and click bottom, and you'll see now the barrier is made up of this image view as well as this text view. So if this text had to get smaller, the barrier would be to the bottom of this image view, but now it's to the bottom of this text view. So we can then drag and constrain things to this barrier. So if I now take this button, drag it on screen, okay, I can now constrain this button to the barrier. I hope that's going to the barrier and not to the image view, the text view, but we'll see now. And then I don't want it to go automatically to that. I want to constrain that to the guideline. Okay, so we've got one button there. I just want to double check that it's constrained to the barrier. Yes, okay, so that means now it will be constrained to the top of the barrier. And I can add another button as well. So let's go and drag another one on. Okay, constrain this to the bottom of the barrier and to the side. Okay, cool. So now I've got two buttons. And as soon as, like, say, for instance, this text gets smaller, so let's just make right here beauty. You'll see now that it constrains to the bottom of this image view instead of the bottom of this text view. So as soon as this text gets bigger, it makes sure that everything moves down below with it as well. So we can change this button now. So we want this button to be that sort of pink, let's have a look, this accent color that we have of the whole app. So we can change this now. This is another thing that I think a lot of people don't use or realize, but you can use this, not text appearance, sorry, button style. So this allows you to just get like the sort of standard button styles without having to change the colors or anything yourself. So we can select the colored button here, and then the colored button here. And now we have that sort of look that we were looking for earlier. So we want this text to say rent from, or rent 29 Rand. I suppose I should be doing this like dollars or something. What's the other one? Purchase, I think. Buy. Okay. So we want this one to say buy. 129 Rand. Okay, so we've got our two buttons, but we need them to sort of take up the full width of the screen and make sure that it uses that space appropriately. So for this, I would use what we call chains. So we can right click on these two and click on chain, create horizontal chain. And that makes sure that these two things are taking up equal space between them. So you can also cycle through the different chain modes. So you can make sure that they're distributed. That looks like it is not constrained to the barrier. So I'm just going to make sure the guideline, sorry. Yeah. And this one doesn't look like it's done to that as well. Or is it? Perhaps it is. Come on. Yeah. Okay, so we want to make sure that these take up correct width. So I would make sure that they are matching constraints. No, no. Come on. I've stuffed something up now. Come on. Width. Oh, I said height. Whoopsie. Height must be wrap content. Width must be match constraint. Match constraint. And height must be wrap content. Okay, cool. So now I have two buttons. I probably want a little bit more padding in between the two. So button 2, let's add a little bit more padding. Cool, so those buttons are constrained to the bottom of this view. We can run this so long just to see what it looks like. Hopefully it won't completely break. But you should also be noticing these little warnings that we've got here. So now this is this barrier. Okay, so my barrier is not constrained, which is probably okay actually, because it is including those other views. So I don't think we have to worry about that one. And to use vector drawable compact, okay, I need to do that. Damn, I forgot about that. Okay, let's go and make sure we have that before it moans. I think it's in here. Vector drawables. Just go copy this. Okay. Okay. Go back to this one. Sorry, I don't remember this offhand. Where is that other thing? Did it the other day. Yeah. Love. Okay, delete that. Okay. All right. Go. Okay, cool. So we have sort of an app that's working. So you can see now, because we got that text saying button instead of rent, that's why it's displaying that. So move these to strings.xml. Don't do what I'm doing. This is why I didn't make it a copy paste blog post. Okay. All right, so we're getting there, sort of looking all right. What we just need now is these sort of buttons below. I'm going to skip the divider for now because I see we are now on 48 minutes into the stream. So we'll go in ahead and sort of create these buttons down below. So I'm just going to use fab buttons for them because, I don't know, they look like they are fab buttons. So we can just add this floating action button. So for the first one, we'll add this one. And let's just set it to the bookmark. Okay. So we drag in the floating action button. Wait for Gradle to build. Come on. Cool, so we've got one button. Let's drag in a few more. 2. Also just note I'm not giving these proper names. You should totally give them proper names when you drag them in. 4. I think also on this Google Play Movies layout, they do use, I think, a recycler view because they do have like a dynamic number of things that are in this sort of list or of buttons. So the first one that we want is, okay, so we are kind of running out of time. So I'm just going to copy the drawables from this folder. So we have similar. So let's just reveal in Finder. Okay, and go back to this one. So drawable. Okay. Oh, wrong folder. Sorry. That one. Okay, we want to add the similar drawable. We want to add the family, I think. We'll just do these. Okay, so we've got these little icons, so now we can set them. So this first one, we want to just set to one of them, similar. It's not rendering these things with when it's referenced like that. I wonder why. Okay, let's just do it like this for now. Okay. All right, let's set this one. So the similar. And then I think we also had one that was like rotten tomato. So we can go here, I did download it. So we can just drag that one in as well. You should probably also make sure you have different sizes for different ones. Okay, that one, bookmark. We want the tomato. Okay, we can change this color to something else. Just make it a blue one for now. Okay, why is this one the same? All right, so let's just lay these out properly on the screen. So you can see now they've got all warnings on here because they're not constrained properly. So we can create a chain with all of them. So right click chain, create horizontal chain. Okay, now they're all chained together, but they're not constrained to the top. So what I would do is also create a barrier to make sure that if one button was a bit higher than the other one, then it would properly constrain it. But for now, we're just going to constrain them all to the top of these views. Okay, cool. So they do look a little bit smaller than the other ones. I think we set the value on that to be a bit bigger. If I have a look at the constraint layout demo. So these ones, I set the height to 56 dp on each one. So we can go back to that. Set the height. This also sometimes doesn't work so well. 56 dp. Cool. It's starting to look a little bit better. Okay. Cool. Okay, so now we have these little lines and items. Just want to double check that they are constrained to the barrier, the guideline, and not to something else. So let's just check to start with parent. Nope, we want that to be the barrier. So you can do it programmatically as well. Barrier. And then the last one we want as well to barrier. Which one? Oh no, not barrier. Sorry, that's completely wrong. That should be guideline. Yeah, and this one should be guideline as well. Guideline 2. Cool. So that's starting to look a bit better. What is it moaning about? Clickable actually found. Please add focusable. Okay, we'll ignore that one for now. Okay, let's have a run, see how it looks. Okay. Cool, so we have some buttons as well. So we also want to add that, I think we had text views underneath. Let's have a look. Yeah, so we had some text views underneath, which I would let's just do one so we can show it, but then we'll have to sort of stop where we are. Okay, so we got one text view. So to do this, I would just constrain it to the sides of each view, and then it will sort of center it itself, and then constrain it to the bottom. So now we can say, instead of text view, we can say, I think this one is rating. And then we want the width of this one to match constraint. Yeah. So yeah, you can go ahead and do that for all these different views to make sure that it has these little things underneath. And then we probably want to set that to be a smaller size text as well, so that it can make sure there are the correct sizing from this view itself. So these are a little bit smaller. So I would go ahead and just set it to the appearance of something else. Okay, so while it's running, I just want to go through some of the questions that we're getting. Okay, so what is the benefit of constraint layout? Okay, so good question. So constraint layout has a lot of different things that you can do. So for example, the guidelines, the barriers, but I think the biggest benefit about using constraint layout is that it is a more expressive way of writing a view. So instead of having programmatically have sort of positioning information within your view, so by positioning information, I mean like have relative layouts, and then all your things are nested in between here. So instead of having that, you are just declaratively writing exactly what should be in the layout, and then on the layout items themselves, you are adding these constraints manually, and well, not manually, but you can use the editor, but you're adding the constraint information onto it. So it's a lot easier to write as well. And as well as you can use this amazing layout editor instead of trying to programmatically do it themselves. So yes, it's got that. It's also got the advantage of it being a lot more performant than other layouts. So you typically have to nest a lot of layouts when you're trying to get this sort of level of complexity. Whereas with this, you can see there's no nesting that I've done here. It's all sort of one layer deep in terms of writing this layout. Yeah, so that's the benefit of using constraint layout. Also, it's a lot more modern, and there's a lot more features being added to it as we go instead of the old layouts that don't have that. So I hope that answers that question. Okay, when do you start to use DP values or something like match constraints? Okay, so that's also a good question. So deciding to use DP value versus something like match constraints. So for something like a text view that has to change its size, where you have text that maybe is dynamic, or a user can control the text size on their device, you wouldn't really be setting the DP on it. So you would set it to sort of take up the view that you have and let Android decide how big this view should be. Whereas something like a button, for example, this one has like an image view inside it, and it's sort of like a standard size. It's not going to resize with anything on the view unless it is maybe used for something like a tablet layout. So I would typically here maybe set a height and a width on it. The only reason why I did that here is because we wanted it to be a little bit bigger. But yeah, so typically try avoid setting DPs as much as you can. But for the most part, like for instance, the size of this poster, I had to set it in order for it to be a little bit smaller on the screen. So that's where you'd sort of start to use DP positioning information. Okay, what else are the questions here? What is the benefit of constraining it to the guideline instead of the parent side? Just the fact that you don't need margins. Okay, so one big benefit about constraining to a guideline is that now if I start to move the guideline, say for instance now I have a tablet layout, or I have some kind of animation, if I just change the guidelines margin on it, everything will change that's aligned to it. So instead of having to go manually and find every single view that should be constrained, I can just do it once on this whole guideline. There's also a really great talk, I think, coming out soon from Nicholas Roord, the guy from the Constraint Layout team. So this is one guy that you should follow on Twitter if you do follow anyone today. Let's just have a look if I can find him. Nicholas Roord. So if you follow this guy on Twitter, I cannot find him now. People, come on. Okay, I'll find him and link him soon. But if you follow him on Twitter, you'll see he does an example of an animation using the guidelines. So you can do quite a lot of stuff, and I think there's going to be a lot more to come by using guidelines. So it does make your layout a lot easier to use as well, because you don't have to set the same margin on everything that you have. Okay, so what else are people asking? Sure, there's quite a lot of comments here. Okay, so I just want to quickly go through some of the other things that I found that people do. So I'm not going to continue with this layout. So I think we've done quite a lot on this layout, and adding the text views and all that should be quite simple from this point on. But I think one of the most common mistakes that people make about constraint layouts is that they're not using it at all. So I've seen a lot of people just completely ignore using constraint layout, and I think that's quite a big misconception, that they think it's not stable. So I've had a couple of comments where people say that it's only in beta, it's not in stable, which is completely untrue. There is, obviously, I'm using beta version in this example, but there is a stable version. I think it's the latest one is 1.0.2, but I might be on the wrong version here. But this version is stable, and you can use it in your current live applications. You can see now that I've changed it, some things aren't available. So, for example, barriers have only been added in the beta version of constraint layout. So I can switch back to beta. So I would say the most common mistake is that people don't use constraint layout, which is why I'm trying to do a lot more of these sort of examples using it. Okay, so we've covered placing an item and thinking it'll stay where it is. So that's another one. So people just place the item on the view, and they're like, cool, it's where I've placed it, so it's going to be displayed there. So like I mentioned, you have to make sure that it has constraints on it in order for it to be displayed properly. And those layout X and Y values don't take effect when you do put something on the device. So they'll only display properly when they're demoed here, but they won't be displayed properly on there. Okay, so the margin issue as well. So people don't use guidelines. I think they maybe just don't know that they're there. So I would say try these out and make sure that you try use them, because they're quite useful. Using match parent inside constraint layout. Okay, so I did touch on this one a little bit earlier, but one of the big problems that I've seen is a lot of people just use match parent because they're used to it. So instead of using 0DP or wrap content, they are using match parents. Don't do this, because constraint layout doesn't really know what to do with this. It doesn't really exist anymore when you're using constraint layout. So 0DP means match constraint, and you can use wrap content as well, but you will get some maybe some weird overlapping issues if you use wrap content on a text view or something. Okay, what else? Okay, so there was one last thing that I wanted to touch on, which I found a little bit confusing when I started using it. So let's just go to a simple demo here. So I can have these sort of text views. So I've seen a lot of people, so in the constraint layout example, there is, or the code lab that you do, there's this button that they refer to as the pack button. And I think this one can be misused quite a lot. So the pack button, what it does is, if you have a whole bunch of text in something, so okay, so I have this text view, and I click on this pack button. Okay, so I think, which was it, this one? No, this button. So this pack button, when you click on it, so this sort of means, and maybe for me, like maybe it was just a misunderstanding from my side, but it means take up the full width of the screen. But when using this button, you must just be careful about what exactly it does, because if you have a look now, it set the width on this item to 344 dp, which is all fine and well for this size screen. But now if I have to change my screen to maybe what size? I don't know, Nexus 10. You'll see that it actually doesn't take up the full width of the screen. So when using this pack button, you have to just be very careful about what exactly you're doing with it. So I think the intention of this pack button is to sort of make sure it takes up the full width, and then you create the constraint. So you could create the constraint now, and then it should sort of go to match constraints. But now you can see it's still set on 344 dp. So this is not a good idea to do. So you would probably want to use it to say, match the constraints of this thing. I'm not sure why it's done that now with match constraints. Okay, yeah, but anyway, so the pack button I think is quite a sort of troublesome or lead you on a little troublesome path down down somewhere in constraint layout. So if I give you another example of where you would use it, like if you click on it now and say take up the full width, it sort of hard codes this value of 495 dp. So just be careful when using this pack button to make sure that you're not getting these sort of dp values. I think you can get away without using this button at all. I personally haven't found really much value in using it. Okay, so that was those things. I think that is all from my side in terms of like errors and that. Hopefully you've learned some stuff from it. There is some examples online, so if you want to have a look, so let me just get my notes quickly. Okay, so if you want to have a look at the full demonstration of this layout, so this exact, okay, not that one's the one we quickly threw together, but this layout that we've got here, you can head to this constraint layout demo example on my GitHub if you want, as well as yeah, so the different things that we covered. So I do have, there's another video on my YouTube account that does have me going through all the different features of constraint layout. So stepping through one by one what the different features are. So have a look on my YouTube account. It's also just the Rigaroo on YouTube. And you'll see in, like, I work through all the different things within the constraint layout features. So have a look at that if you haven't used constraint layout at all. But hopefully this sort of gave you some insight into how I sort of work around in constraint layout. I'm not very elegant when using Android Studio, but we came to some kind of layout that we have at the end. And yeah, I think that is all from my side. So thank you so much for tuning in. Follow me on Twitter or say something on YouTube. Yeah, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you all soon. Goodbye.